nationwide and see what's happening around the country in our daily visit to the BBC newsrooms around the UK. We're joining Edward Sault today. He's in Southampton this afternoon and can tell us more about a luxury cruise ship which has docked in the city and has had a rather tumultuous journey. Edward, bring us up to speed.
It certainly has, Martine. Picture the scene, going on a luxury cruise up to the Norwegian fjords and then over to Iceland. It sounds magical, doesn't it? But for the passengers that returned to Southampton today, it was anything but. They should have first called at Amsterdam and then Le Havre. Both of those ports were cancelled, and then they had an extended stay in Norway. They were then supposed to go on to Iceland, but they were told that wasn't going to happen. So they then began protesting. They wanted their money back because they weren't getting the cruise that they paid for. This was all put down to the weather. They were then told they were going to stop in Greenock, just off the side of Glasgow there. But they were then told, we can't call into Greenock because of the weather too. As they arrived back at the Mayflower terminal in Southampton today, they told me that they were pretty fed up.
Terrible, and we're exhausted. It was disappointing. We're exhausted from all this. We're going back home to keep fighting, and it was not a vacation. It was anything but a vacation for us.
We missed 2 ports in Iceland, we missed Amsterdam, and they made all these other ports that were cancelled. So Le Havre, they said we're going to go there instead. Greenock, we're going to go there instead. Both of them cancelled. We just went out at sea for 3 days straight. It seemed like we were just going around in circles. It was terrible.
So by the 11th day, the people on the cruise ship was not happy and protesting to demand a refund and asking management to do the right thing.
They sold us an unforgettable cruise. I will not forget that cruise, trust me.
You spent the morning at the port, Ed, haven't you? People have spent a lot of money on these holidays. What was the atmosphere like?
Well, it was pretty tense, actually. There was lots of security around. It was damp and miserable, which I guess doesn't really make for the perfect conditions if you come back from a dreadful holiday that many saw it in their eyes. I did get to stop and talk to an American couple from Dallas in Texas. Interestingly, they told me that they had a brilliant time.
There was bad weather. We had followed the radar before we even came onto the cruise, and we expected bad weather. And the ports were canceled because there were high winds and very dangerous seas. So to us, it made sense to cancel the ports. And the ship itself is fabulous. The crew is great, the food was great, the entertainment's great. Hard to get upset about a couple of extra days at sea.
Why didn't they step out on the deck in the morning, and this is in Greenock, to see just how awful it was out, and the captain made the wise decision.
Now, 2 happy campers there. Interestingly, Norwegian cruise lines who operate the Norwegian Spirit say the reasons for the revised itinerary was all because of the weather. They've apologised for any inconvenience caused, but they insist that the safety of passengers and crew, Martine, obviously remains paramount. Now, interestingly, we can see the Norwegian Spirit outside of the BBC South newsroom here in Southampton. She's due to leave in around 20 minutes bound for France before heading on to Venice. Now, I'm sure passengers and crew on board that voyage will be hoping that it's pretty more plain sailing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Fingers crossed for them. Edward, thank you very much. Edward Sault in Southampton. Thank you very much for taking us nationwide this afternoon.
Also tonight, passengers' anger as their dream cruise heads into troubled water.
They sold us an unforgettable cruise. I will not forget that cruise, trust me.
Now, the chance to enjoy the Norwegian fjords. It almost sounds like a line from a Monty Python sketch, but there was nothing funny for the cruise passengers who returned to Southampton this morning. They did see the fjords, but they missed Iceland completely. The toilets were blocked and there were complaints about the food. Now, that prompted onboard protests, but the cruise company insists it did the best it could in poor weather. Edward Sault reports.
Refund now! Refund now!
Furious passengers on board the Norwegian Spirit cruise ship after a trip from Southampton to Norway and Iceland missed key stops.
We signed up for a 14-day Iceland adventure, right? We didn't even get to Iceland, yet that's what they called this cruise.
The 14-day cruise missed its first two ports of Le Havre and Amsterdam, remaining at sea. 2 extra stops were added in Norway. But the ship missed out Iceland altogether, and an attempt to visit Greenock was abandoned. The original itinerary resumed, with final calls to Belfast and Dublin.
By the 11th day, the people on the cruise ship was not happy and protesting to demand a refund and asking management to do the right thing. A much anticipated trip has turned into a horrific nightmare.
Today, as passengers arrived at Southampton's Mayflower terminal, they told me their magical cruise was anything but.
The problem was that they didn't have communication. There wasn't clear communication on what was happening.
I just hope that Norwegian steps forward to compensate these people for ruining their dream.
Passengers also complained of dirty water in the bathrooms and blocked toilets.
We're going back home to keep fighting, and it was not a vacation.
They sold us an unforgettable cruise. I will not forget that cruise, trust me.
But not everyone on board was complaining.
We expected bad weather, and the ports were canceled because there were high winds and very dangerous seas. So to us, it made sense to cancel the ports.
Why didn't they step out on the deck in the morning to see just how awful it was out? And the captain made the wise decision.
Norwegian Cruise Lines, who operate the Norwegian Spirit, have apologised for any inconvenience caused. They say the reason for the revised itinerary was simply due to the weather, and that the safety of their passengers and crew on board the ship is always #1 priority. Tonight, the Norwegian Spirit left Southampton bound for France. Passengers and crew will be hoping this voyage will be plain sailing. Edward Sault, BBC South Today, Southampton.